Hi, I'm Makoto Takemiya, one of the contributors to Sora with updates for April 22nd, 2023. Today I want to talk a little bit about some macroeconomic trends that are really quite disturbing. So you might have seen that a lot of countries are accepting local currencies for trade, international trade. So for example, the United Arab Emirates accepting Kenyan shillings in exchange for oil, or the Russians accepting the Bolivian Boliviano in exchange for payments. Now, on the face of it, this might seem like something that's quite good because it gives access directly between countries for trade, so you don't have to go through some central clearing currency. So, for example, most transactions go through US dollars, so they go through a CLS bank in the US, and then they exchange from a local currency to dollar, and then dollar to whatever the other target currency is. Even if two countries are next to each other, they do this through the dollar usually because there's more liquidity. And there's many downsides to having that. It's good for the dollar system, and it's good because the US can monitor all transactions done through CLS Bank, but it's bad, I would say, for international trade because it's pretty inefficient to have to go all the way to New York to make a transaction just to your neighboring country. Now, so it may seem good to do trade in Kenyan shillings or Bolivianos or other currencies, but it's actually quite a dangerous thing because a lot of these countries don't have very good monetary policy, which is why they don't have higher employment or higher economic growth or technological advancement. They don't have economic rationality, in other words. And so if you use a country's currency like that, then you do have the problem that they may, for political reasons, just overinflate the currency's supply. And this could be quite dangerous for the value of the currency. So the Boliviano or the Kenyan shilling or other currencies, these may have good aspects today, but you don't know how things will be in the long term. So it's quite a dangerous situation because the global economy is going to get more and more fragile as these bilateral trades in local currencies increase. And that's quite a dangerous thing because if you wanted to create a global economic catastrophe, that's a good way to do it. So the dollar would lose value, and at the same time you're using all these fiat shitcoins, and really what happens is everything will just collapse, and then that will pave the way potentially to a global one world government and currency, which I think is something that is not really the best solution to a crisis like that. So what we're trying to do with Sora is actually prevent a situation like that. So we have a transnational currency zone using the ZOR token, and everyone who has the ZOR token takes part in the governance, and so they can do some management to make sure that single countries are not overinflating their token supply. And everything is transparently seen on the blockchain. And we see this today. Everyone in our chats is looking at the supply maybe 10 times a day and looking at how things are changing. And, that it's a little bit dangerous to get focused too much on supply and not economic fundamentals. But it is good to have that type of transparency, especially when you're trying to build a transnational currency system. So hopefully we can get some progress on that, and that will help make the global financial system much more resilient because you won't have all these bilateral trades in fiat shitcoins. I know it's a long path and may seem almost utopian, but it's very logical conclusion to how you would apply blockchain technology to the real financial system. So a deep understanding of how the transnational capital flows works and what the opportunities are to combine the Japanese post-war miracle high growth economics with this new technology shows the opportunity for Sora to really make a big change in the world and to break into the global markets. So it's something that we're working on, and I just wanted to give a little bit of perspective on that. That being said, it'll be interesting to see how things go in the next few years. I was at the IMF World Bank spring meetings last week, and an American economist was talking about, what would happen, or he was asked by the audience what would happen to America if the dollar loses its reserve currency status. And he just was very nonchalant about it and said that, nothing would really happen. America would just be like Australia, where Australia dollar is not the world's reserve currency, but life goes on and they have a pretty good lifestyle in Australia. That's what he said. But he kind of misses the point that Australian trade really is very highly dependent on the US dollar, and they're kind of piggybacking on the reserve currency status of the US dollar with their own economy. And if the US dollar loses users and that status goes away, we'll see more fragile cross-country capital flows being done in local currencies. And because of poor economic policies in many of these countries, that will cause basically the local currencies to be devalued, and that someone will be left holding the bags. I don't know if it's going to be Russia or China or who, but I wouldn't want to be holding bolivianos, in 10 years. So it's really quite a dangerous situation. And another thing we have to be careful of are commodity-based currencies. So people like the idea of using gold-backed currencies or things like that. But the people pushing these are always the people with the commodities. And if you study the history of gold-backed currencies, gold and silver, bimetallism, all these movements that have happened in the past, and we can actually study how they actually worked, you see that the people pushing them were always the people with the metals, and they did it for control. And, also prices were not stable under a gold-backed system because, gold is mined from the earth. You get new gold coming out, and it maybe floods the market at times that it shouldn't, because there's no economic fundamental for it. Like if you just happen to find a big gold deposit and flood the market with gold, there may not be productive economic activity at the same time. In fact, it would be coincidental if there was, to absorb the extra gold. So you can go back 100 years, 110 years, you can find many papers and books talking about how bad the gold standard was and how prices were unstable because of the gold standard and things like that. So you don't need, some kind of hunk of rock or metal from the ground in order to have your economy. What you need is people to work. You need people to put out output, solve problems, apply their ingenuity and computation. And with AI, this is just going to become even more profound and important to understand. So let's do our best to make sure that sora is used in many countries and can improve the economic resiliency of the world. Otherwise, the future is going to be quite dark. And with that, I've daily network stats in the last 24 hours. There are 648 transactions on the sora network, 336 of which were swaps, 34 were Demeter farming related transactions, 51 were transfers, and there were 101 active accounts on the sora network. So with these fast updates, let's go back to work.